quick housekeeping before we get started. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, and everyone who signed up will get a link back to the recording. So if you want to share this or view it again, we'll of course send you a link to that. Throughout the webinar, we'll be on Twitter. We use the user account @Cardiolog. So if you have any questions, want to engage with us and so forth, feel free to send us a message on Twitter. And then finally, questions. We will leave some time towards the end of today's webinar to go over any questions that you might have. And of course, you can use the questions box in GoToWebinar in order to ask those questions. Our agenda for today, we're starting with this introduction. From there, we'll jump into why social and what's the idea behind social. From there, we'll jump into talking about SharePoint social analytics, Yammer Analytics, and Sitrion Analytics. We'll then do a short demo and I can show you how we can create these social analytics dashboards. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, we'll have some time for Q&A towards the end of the webinar. Continuing with the introduction, for those of you who are not familiar with Intlock, we've been around for 9 years now, since 2005, focused on one area, and that's web analytics for enterprise platforms, so everything from SharePoint, SharePoint Online, and all the on-prem versions, Yammer, Sitrion, and many other platforms. And our goal is to leverage analytics in order to help our customers constantly improve and enhance their environments. So by using things such as monitor and engaging users, our goal is to help our customers constantly improve SharePoint for their users, improve Yammer, and really get the most out of these platforms after the large investments that our customers have placed into these enterprise solutions. Jumping right into social, I want to start with a quick poll and ask you all how you're using social. So you should all be able to see a poll, and I'd be happy if you took a moment just to answer. What's the state in your organization? Are you currently using analytics? Are you currently using social? Are you planning, or is your organization lagging a bit and not even sure why one would want social? Give everyone another second or two to answer. All right, and then very quickly, you should be able to see the results here. So most of you all are using social today, about 77% of our audience, and then there's about 8% who are looking to start using social in the next few months, and then a few that still aren't quite there yet, but hopefully we can give you some ideas during today's webinar as to why social is so great, and also how we can leverage that with analytics. All right, so that's the poll. Let's jump back into the slide deck. All right, so a quick introduction and why we might want to use social. So according to McKinsey & Company, there's some very interesting numbers that they've provided around enterprise social. For example, in the next few years, social will contribute to around $900 billion to $1.3 trillion in annual value. It will improve worker productivity by 25%. And while the average employee today spends about 28% of their time on email and 20% looking for content, social has the power to reduce that by as much as 35%. So definitely some big numbers here and some great ways that different organizations see that we'll be able to improve with the help of social. What's the goal, or what's the idea behind socials? There are a few different areas, and I want to take a moment to talk about 5 of these. The first is collaboration, so improving the ability to collaborate within the organization. Tools like an intranet, SharePoint, and so forth were a great starting point for collaboration, but with social there's quite a bit more that we can do And so collaboration is definitely a key for social. Second, community. It's also about having each user interact with content, so using the documents they need and so forth, but more about having those users or employees work together to be able to share content, to provide feedback on successful projects. Productivity. With social, we're able to improve productivity and efficiency within our organization. Next, organizing knowledge. Today, if an employee sends an email to another employee, then the knowledge is only between the two of them. And once they leave, that knowledge is now lost. We don't have a real good way to organize or manage that knowledge. But once we shift into social platforms, we're now able to better organize the knowledge and save it for future employees as well. And then finally, reducing email. Today, the majority of us, the main way that we communicate is through email. And so social has the potential to change it to reduce the amount that we use email. And then again, based on the other points here, help us collaborate better than we could with email, help us be more productive than we are currently with email, and so forth. So those are a few goals when talking about social. And then finally, what are some of the people within the organization saying that might lead us to think that they might benefit from social platforms? So for example, a project manager wants people to better collaborate with their team. Human resources want to know what services employees are benefiting from. So can they rate what HR services are good, which ones they need to improve, and so forth. A community manager wants to share news with employees, better engage employees, make them aware of what's going on within the organization. And then finally, management wants to share a vision with all of its employees. And then all of these, of course, we can achieve with the help of social. And now Microsoft's vision for social is to use a mix of platforms, SharePoint, Yammer, Office 365, and OneDrive together to really help boost the cooperation, collaboration within the organization. And we'll talk about today is how we can use one analytics tool to track all these different platforms in order to constantly improve them as well. So that was a quick introduction into just the idea behind social. Of course, in today's webinar, we're going to focus more on the analytics around social. But for those of you who haven't started using social, want to get some ideas, those are just a few of them for you. Diving into social analytics and to answer the question of why we might need social analytics at all, so to start out, you can only manage what you can measure. The idea is that if we're not sure what's going on within SharePoint or within Yammer or within our community sites, team sites, and so forth, there's no way we can know what's working today, what are employees benefiting from, what's not being used. For example, different HR services that no one is using. And so the idea is to constantly being able to measure our tools in order to constantly improve them for our users. And to give you a few examples, we can track adoption. So again, that's a quick example. If we launched Yammer or Sitrion within our organization, are people actually using the tool? Are more people on board with the tool over time? Another example, measure productivity. So again, just because we've deployed these tools, it doesn't mean people are using them. Even if they're using them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more productive and so forth. So we want to be able to track productivity. Collaboration, again, the fact that we can analyze this is so important because because an organization now allows their employees to do things like use message boards or add comments to documents and rate documents, doesn't mean they're actually doing so, and therefore we really have to track and make sure people are collaborating. And then finally, community. The idea is to constantly be able to engage with the community, make sure that communities are engaged with themselves. And so again, the key is to leverage analytics in order to track that as well. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is dive into a few of these and talk about things like community, like content, like users, and a few other examples to show you some real-world examples of how we can actually leverage analytics to measure all these things. So when talking about social analytics in the content realm, there's a big shift that we're seeing from what used to be basic analytics metrics, like page views, for example, to social metrics. So if you look at a tool like Google, for example, Google Analytics, there the main metric is a page view, and the document that's been viewed the most number of times, that's the most popular content, or that's the most used document. But what we're seeing is that it's much better to analyze or to rank content based on social metrics. So the shift is from page views, how many times the document has been viewed by our users, to how influential is that content. And the way we'll measure influence is going to be things like how many comments has that document received, or likes, or has it been rated high. Just because two documents have received 100 page views doesn't mean they're both equally as important. One might have a very high rating level, and the other not. And by that, we can learn exactly what our users are benefiting from and what content we might want to change, to revise or revisit that content that has a lower rating. And then, of course, things like followers also. Of course, with new social features, we can follow content. And then again, content that has a high following rate is probably more useful for our users and more needed, and we should focus on that content. So I'll show you a quick few examples and a few screenshots to show this in a better way. All right, so here we have a dashboard, and we can see here a few metrics. At the top here, we have some of the basic metrics that we talked about earlier, so what we called page views. So here again, we can see what's most popular based on how many times the content has been viewed, by how many users, and so forth. But again, the evolution here is to see not only page views, but more interesting metrics like followers, likes, comments. So again, right here we can see is not only how many times the content has been viewed, but are many people following it and liking it. And then also, what's the rating of that content? Of course, content has a higher rating is most likely benefiting our employees more, regardless of how many page views that content has. Another example here, if you take a look at the metric here at the bottom of my screen, here we have lots of content, for example, this NDA. So you can see the basic metrics like views, unique users, and so forth. Now, for those of you familiar with Cardiolog, what we can do is drill down on context. So if this NDA interests me, I can click on it again to a few options here. The older option, or the more basic option for analytics, is what we call an Internet Document Dashboard. We'll take a look at that and also show the social dashboard. So again, we'll take a look at two drill down dashboards. The first one here is going to be what we call that page views based dashboard. So we can see things, number of page views that this document has, this Intlock NDA, for example. We can see where people came from to view this document and who are the actual users, like Roger here, who actually access this document. But if we jump into the more social analytics for this specific document, here we can see now how many followers the document has, how many likes, its rating. So out of 5 stars, this document only got 2 stars. And more than that, we can see the actual users here who are actually following this document. So again, that's the key shift we're talking about. From those basic metrics like page views, we want to go and see what content is actually influential for our users and for our employees by tracking these social actions. Next, from content, we'll jump into users. And again, here there's another shift from what are employees viewing to how are they interacting with each other. So up till now, our customers were eager to find out which users have been accessing the most content. And then by knowing they've accessed the most content, they're our top users. Or users who don't get to a certain threshold of, let's say, 25 page views each week, they're not using SharePoint enough. But now we see a change or a shift, and the idea is to shift from unique users to influential users. So it doesn't really matter how much content a user has been accessing. At the end of the day, a user needs to use SharePoint to achieve their daily tasks, right? If they need a document, they have to go to SharePoint and open up that document. So by default, they'll have several page views when accessing that document. But our big shift here is from the actual unique users to the amount of influential users. So just because you had 100 page views this week doesn't mean that you're actually influencing the organization, and doesn't mean that you're really engaging with your fellow employees. So what does matter is the influential users. How many followers does a user have? Or how many posts and comments have they made? The idea is that posts and comments, for example, is actually them contributing to the discussion within our enterprise. So that's the big shift here. The fact that I viewed content means that I'm doing my day-to-day tasks, but the fact that I am posting, that I'm commenting, and that I am contributing to news feeds and so forth, that shows that I'm active in the discussion within my organization. And then another example here, popular profiles. So we can also show which user profiles have been viewed the most, for example. And again, let's jump into a few actual dashboards to see this. All right, so here again, we can see this dashboard. The main shift here, instead of seeing the users with the most number of page views, we can now see users with the most number of followers. So I can see a list of users, how many followers they have, and then I can actually drill down on Abraham here, for example, and see who are the users who are actually following him specifically. So that was earlier we saw influential users. A few other examples that we have here are user activity. So again, beyond just if they're accessing content in SharePoint, as we expect all our users to do, are they active? Are they engaging in discussions? Are they posting content, commenting, and so forth? So we can see all of those more engaging actions right here. And then finally, top user profiles. So who are the users who are most interesting in our organization? Who are people checking out in the organization and so forth? We can track all of that right here as well. So that was content and also users. We're going to the third area of social analytics, and this is where we're going to talk about community. So again, we talked about this a little bit when we spoke about the users. There's a big shift from just using the environment, from just using SharePoint, to actually being engaged in what's going on. All right, and then again, the big shift here from usage to actual engagement. We are spending a lot of time building these communities up, and the question is, are they benefiting our employees? Are there actual active discussions there? Are people sharing different experiences they've had with customers, or are they keeping it to themselves? Because again, the end goal of social is to help us interact and share our success or even our failures within the organization, so that other employees, other branches and departments can learn both from our success and our failures. And so we really need to show that there are active discussions, that people are posting, that they're asking questions. These are the only ways we can really benefit from social and gain all that increased productivity, collaboration, and so forth that we talked about earlier. Now, about community, we'll talk more about this now as you jump into third-party tools like Yammer and Sitrion. So again, the idea is that the Cardiolog product can track many different technologies at the same time. So one analytics tool to track all of your digital assets, your intranet, your extranet, your website, your Yammer site, Sitrion, and so forth. And so from there, we'll jump more into community and talk about Yammer Analytics as well. So here I want to dive right into some of the many reports that we have for Yammer. And you can see a wide variety here in this list, everything from adoption to active users, posts, groups, and so forth. And I'll just show you a few of these as an example. So starting out with adoption. So again, we spent a lot of time and effort and budgets building out our Yammer environment. The key here is to measure, are people adopting this tool? Are they using it? And we want to show here is that over time, our usage of Yammer is increasing. More people are learning how to use it, benefiting from it, and so forth. And so here we can track everything around adoption. A recurring theme, influence. We saw this earlier within SharePoint, social analytics, but very similar here in Yammer. So who are our influencers? Who are our top users? Who are the users who are creating the most engaging content, the most interesting content that others want to follow? Once we can detect who are these users and see what content they're creating, then we can really understand what's the engaging content our users are so interested in. So here an example for influential users, and then of course we saw this earlier as well, who are following each and every user. We can also break this down by different groups. So is there a specific group that follows a specific user? Mostly. Next, group activity, so talking about communities and so forth. Here for each group, we can see the number of members that make up that group, and then just how active are these groups. And are there groups that are very active with many posts and shares and so forth, and groups that are not as active? Again, the idea here is to have actionable metrics. If I was to be able to scroll down this list here, it's of course a screenshot, but if we can scroll down this list, right away we can show what are the groups who aren't using Yammer as often. So we might have 10 different groups who are laggers, and then we can pinpoint training just for those 10 groups because we know they're the ones who aren't adopting Yammer as well. So instead of tackling adoption from an organization-wide standpoint, we can now tackle it based on the actual groups who aren't using Yammer as often. Inactive users, of course, if there are specific user licenses that aren't being used, we can quickly delete or get rid of those inactive users. And then also in Yammer, influential content. So besides actually viewing content, which was what we used to be interested in, here we have a big shift into content that's really engaging. People find it beneficial enough to share that they want to follow it, to get updates about new versions for that content, and so forth. From there, we'll jump into Sitrion, give a few examples for this platform for analytics. So things like community activity, active users, popular posts and questions, activity logs. I think let's dive into a little more details and show a few examples here. So here's this quick screenshot for community activity and active users. The first one, community activity. We can see here how active are each one of these activities based on things like posts, comments, questions, and so forth. And then again, we can analyze this to see what are the topics really that users are engaged in, which are the communities who aren't using this platform as often, offer them more training, and then again, the idea is to constantly improve our social platforms based on the data that we're seeing here in the analytics. More than that, besides seeing just the community level, seeing the individual user as well. So again, who are our most engaged users, who are producing the most content, who's able to answer questions and so forth. Again, the idea is to constantly understand what's going on in SharePoint and Yammer and Sitrion and other platforms in order to constantly improve those platforms. Another example here for posts and questions. So here, very easy to read and analyze. Here we have a list of the most popular posts. You see how many comments they received, how many likes. So very quickly, you can see what are the topics that people find most engaging, what really interests you employees, and then posts here with maybe 0 comments or very few comments. Right away, you can understand those are the topics people either don't know enough about or simply don't interest them enough to communicate around them. But again, you can change the content and your education and so forth based on the topics that people are most interested in. Another example, questions. What are the top questions our employees have? Are there things that many employees simply don't know? If so, we can add that to our introduction training when a new employee joins the company. But again, only once we know what are the most interesting questions or the questions that most people are asking, only then can we go back to change things like that introduction training program. Another example here, inactive users. Here at the bottom of this screenshot, you can see the total users we have in our platform and the number of inactive users within the platform. So again, if there's a very high ratio here, if half of our users are inactive, we're doing something wrong within the organization. So either the platform isn't good enough and not benefiting our employees, or they don't know how to use it. And again, that's some of the key metrics and the key ways that we can leverage metrics in order to go back and improve the environment. And then the last metric that I want to share with you before I jump into a quick demonstration is going to be activity and tags. So here at the center of the screenshot, you can see a trend over time of the activity within our environment. And we see activity broken down by different actions. You can, of course, customize this and define how many posts were made on each day, comments, questions, answers, and so forth. And then see trends over time, our posts increasing. And then just below that, if we're tagging content, we can see what are the more popular tags, more popular discussion topics, and so forth. So from here, we'll jump into Cardilock to show a few examples of this and how we can easily build these dashboards as well. Let's go ahead and refresh the screen. All right, so this is the Cardilock user interface. I'm going to jump into the report center and also full screen my browser for you so you can see a little more data here. All right, there we go. So what we'll do, we'll build a new dashboard together. We'll take a blank report, and we'll call this the November social webinar. And we want this dashboard sent out to our colleagues once every week, for example. All right, and then here's our blank dashboard. For those of you familiar with Cardilock already, what we've done is added these different categories to the Add button here. And for those who aren't, I'll give a little bit of background. So here in this Add button, we have different categories of analytics. So things like page views, visitors, navigation, search, and so forth. And then below that, you can see the newer social metrics. So here we have three categories that I'll go over. One is social, so different social actions. Again, besides what we've seen earlier with things like page views and unique users, here you can see a list of metrics that include actions such as likes, rating, followers, influential users, and other social actions. Let's add a few of these to our dashboard. Let's add influential users as an example. I'll also add rated content. So as opposed to content that's been viewed, content that has the highest rating. And let's also add the liked content. So the idea is it's very easy for a user to drag and drop these widgets onto the dashboard based on the data or the metrics they want to see. You can easily scroll down these different widgets as well. That's an example for a few metrics that we're taking from SharePoint Analytics. I'll go back to the Add button, and the next category is going to be Yammer. And you can see a long list of metrics that are provided for Yammer. So some of the things we talked about earlier, like influential users, group activity, and so forth. I'll just go ahead and add a few of these to our dashboard. Let's add group activity. As well as influential users, for example. All right, and here you can see, for example, the users with the most followers, each group in our organization, and how active they are. We can filter this by number of members that they have, number of posts, shares, and so forth. And then finally, for our dashboard, I'll go to the Sitrion category. And then here we have metrics like community activity, user activity, activity log, and so forth. And again, I'll add the community log to start out with. All right, so here it's not really clear, the data, so we can easily customize this metric. Instead of seeing a line chart, we can easily change this so that the appearance is being displayed in the way it's most convenient for you as the user. Instead of line, we can choose bar, pie, and many other types. I'll take column for this example. And let's preview that here. All right, so you can see the actual amounts. And then, of course, in that preferences we saw earlier, we can add values onto each bar and so forth. But again, very easy to customize all these widgets. Move that here for now. And then another example from Sitrion. Let's add community activity. All right, so you can see again the activity based on the different communities. Now here I've shown, or I've created one dashboard with metrics for both SharePoint, Yammer, and Sitrion. But of course, you can build as many dashboards as you want. You can have one just for SharePoint, one just for Yammer, and so forth. And then here we also have several preferences, so things like date range. You can select from a predefined date range, like this week, last month, this quarter, or customize that and select 2 dates or the past X days if you'd like. So very easy to customize the date range. Website item, when talking about SharePoint, here we can choose the area in SharePoint we want the data to be shown for. So I can create a dashboard, let's say the most liked content or the most influential content across the entire farm, or just in a specific site. I can drill down to specific list or library and see the most influential documents in that library, and so forth. And I can, of course, drill all the way down to a specific list item. So if there's a document, I want to see how many times it was rated, for example, we can see that here as well. It can be any content from a page, a document, a blog, and so forth. And then finally, we have preferences here for users and groups. So I can filter for things like user groups, So you have to see data only for users in my marketing group. Or if I want to exclude a group, I can add my admins and just click on the exclude button. So now it's data for all users except for those in the administrators group. So that's how we can easily take a blank dashboard and add the widgets that you're interested onto that dashboard. And then this is what a generated report will look like. At the very top, a few ways we can share the data. We can export to PDF or to CSV to get the raw data in Excel. I can send via email to a colleague, or I'm interested in creating a distribution list. So if I want 5 of my colleagues to receive this dashboard, we can define that Carla will automatically send it to this email list once every day, week, or month. So it's all completely automated. You can build a dashboard for each site and have that site owner see the data for his or her site. And finally, we can actually display all this data as a web part within SharePoint. So all the widgets you're seeing here can be displayed within a SharePoint web part on a SharePoint page. And of course, those web parts are constantly updated with data. Every day when you browse that page, you'll see an updated metric within that web part. So of course, there's a lot more that we can go over within the tool, but I think we have about 5 more minutes until the end of our 45-minute webinar. So what I'll go ahead and do is get to some questions that you might have. Of course, if you have any questions about this in the next few days or not at this time, you can feel free to contact us. We have a free trial on our website, and of course, we're more than happy to schedule a personal demo for your team if this is something that interests you. But again, for now, we'll jump into a few questions. If you do have any questions, you can go ahead and ask them in the GoToWebinar questions box. And if we don't have time for all the questions, I'll make sure to send everyone an email with the questions or the answers to the questions that we couldn't get to. All right, first question. David is asking which version of SharePoint can this tool, is this tool compatible with? So the answer is that it is compatible with all versions of SharePoint, all the way from, if you're talking on-prem, from 2003 all the way through 2013. And it's also compatible with cloud environments such as SharePoint Online and different tools within Office 365. And it's also compatible with hybrid solutions. If you have an on-prem farm and also migrating to the cloud, Carla can track both those environments at the same time. So one analytics tool to track both your intranet and track your on-prem SharePoint environment and your hosted environment. And then you can also track Yammer, Sitrion, and other tools all together. So that's in regards to the SharePoint versions. Let's take a look at the next question here. All right, next question. Is Cardiolog only built for intranets, or can it track websites as well? So the answer there is that we can track any type of environment. It can be an internal intranet, an extranet, or a public-facing website. And then we saw a few examples earlier for intranets where we can track things like authenticated users by their username. If we're tracking a public-facing site, we can track users based on their IP address since they are anonymous. Next question, follow-up question about tracking multiple environments. So is it possible to get data from both SharePoint 2013 on-prem and Office 365 together in a report? The answer is yes. If you remember earlier in the demo, there's an area where I can choose the areas that I want to report on, and I can choose from a farm, a site, a web application, and so forth. You can choose a few areas, and so for that example, we can choose both a 2010 farm and a 2013 farm, or a 2013 on-prem farm, and a SharePoint Online tenant, and add them both onto the dashboard. So we'll report in one dashboard across both on-prem and in the cloud. Let's get to the next question. All right, Barbara's asking, what does the backend look like? Do we use code tagging, or is there another way that we capture the data? So there are two main ways that we collect the data. One is within SharePoint, we use JavaScript tracking code in order to collect the data. And in tools like Yammer and Sitrion, we collect the data with the use of the Yammer Sitrion APIs, and we'll pull data from there, simply because those are closed environments and we can't add our tracking code into those tools. So that's how the back end looks. And Barbara, I'll be happy to send you also our setup guide just so you can see what that looks like. Next question. Is there a specific report to get information about how many users search for specific documents? The answer is yes. We didn't cover search in this webinar because I want to focus more on the social interactions, but we have a whole category of search analytics, and that can be things from searches performed over time to failed search queries to the actual search terms, and that would actually answer this question. What is specific content or document we're searching for, so that we can show you what's the top search term and what documents have been searched for the most as well. So again, we didn't go into detail on search in this webinar, but I'm more than happy to send you a little more information about search if that's something that interests you. All right, another question about how we connect to Yammer, and yes, the answer is through the API thread. Let's see a few more questions here. All right, next question from Michael asking about the ability to track inactive communities. So we do have a metric that can show you communities with no activity, that they have no comments, no posts, no questions, and so forth. And we're happy to send you a quick follow-up email, Michael, with a screenshot of what that would look like. Next question. Let's take a look here. Melissa's asking if we can use this tool to track only Yammer, and the answer is yes. You definitely don't have to have SharePoint in order to use Cardiolog. You can use it, again, you can use it to track all your environments, SharePoint, Yammer, and so forth. But if you're using only Sitrion, only Yammer, we can definitely track just those environments as well. And since we are at the 45-minute point, I'll go ahead and answer one more question. But again, if there are a few questions that I haven't had time to get to, I'll send everyone a quick email after today's webinar with an answer to those questions. All right, next and last question we'll take from Fred around privacy. Fred is asking how we manage privacy. And so here there are two levels to privacy. First of all, as you saw earlier, we can show the actual users' names within our dashboards. We do have some customers who are located in countries where that's illegal to see what a specific employee is doing within the organization. And so if we're talking about that level of privacy, we have a tool called PII Concealment Tool, where we can simply not show the user's names. Instead of the names, we'll show just a random ID, so you don't actually know who are the users behind the numbers. And again, it's a feature that we offer for organizations who don't want to see individual user activity, or in countries where there's very, very high privacy laws which don't allow us to show the actual user activity. So that's in regards to privacy. And besides that, we can also define roles and permissions within the tool. So if you want to manage permissions within Cardiolog, who can access what dashboards and so forth, we can define all of that within Cardiolog. So again, to those who I didn't have time to get to the questions, we will send a follow-up email with answers to your questions. And again, if anyone would like to schedule a personal demo, if this did seem interesting to you, feel free to send a quick chat here or send a quick email. I'll be more than happy to set that up for you as well. So for now, I thank you all for taking the time and joining us today. I wish you all a very good day.